Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Daniel sent me a note about a story on NBCnews.com. And this one's scary, but at least they got the guy. CBP, Customs and Border Protection, officer pleads guilty to stealing $18,000 from flight passengers during inspections, according to officials. So the man stole the money from passengers going through the Naples, Florida airport while he was doing currency checks as part of his job. So he said, hey, I got to see your currency. I've got to check it. I've got to check it. And when he was checking it, somehow some of it wound up in his possession and not in the possession of the true owners. So CBP officer pleaded guilty to stealing more than $18,000 from arriving international flight passengers by swiping the cash while doing currency verifications. He's 43 years old. He pleaded guilty, and as part of the plea deal, he agreed to also immediately resign from the Border Protection Agency. That's according to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Florida. And this is one of the things, and Daniel jokingly said, Steve, I'm surprised you didn't raise, that this is civil asset forfeiture. And of course, that's when the government takes your money. But they do it through officers, right? And that's what I'm always worried about, is that people have heard that officers do sometimes just take your money. So I wonder how many of these people just thought, oh, that's just the cost of doing business and coming to America. So the man stole a total of about $18,700 from 18 different passengers at the airport between the middle of last year and early this year. In one instance, he stole $2,200 while counting cash during an inspection of a person arriving from the Bahamas. Now, there are 17 cases and 18 passengers listed in the plea agreement. And as part of that deal, he has to pay these people back. We'll see if that happens. An attorney listed as representing the man did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The man pleaded guilty in U.S. District Court in Fort Myers, and that's to a single count of officer or employee of the U.S. converting property of another, which by law carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. A plea agreement reached last month does not specify a sentence guideline range, but prosecutors agreed to recommend downward adjustments if the conditions are met. The question is one of those conditions paying the money back? A sentencing date had not been set as of this writing. And so that's the thing. I've seen it before. They go, okay, you've got to meet a bunch of conditions, and then we'll sentence you. So the guy can pay the money back, then they sentence him, they might go lighter on him. I've also seen it where somebody enters a plea after talking to the prosecutors and says, look, if you will recommend this specific sentence to the court, I'll plead guilty. And they'll say, okay, you could get up to 10 years, but tell you what we'll do, and I'm giving examples here. We'll recommend 5. Judge doesn't have to take it. Also, there are situations where you can enter a plea conditionally, where you discuss this with the prosecutor and you say, I'll plead guilty so long as I get 5 years or less. If the judge gives me more than 5 years, I get to withdraw my guilty plea. That's another thing you can do, okay? But here the interesting thing is they say, look, we'll recommend a downward adjustment so long as you meet these terms. And if one of those terms is paying these people back, that would be a good thing. So I'd be curious to know if that's how that's going to work. But you should understand that in the federal system, time that's been awarded to you under a sentence is actually closer to real time, meaning that a lot of state courts, if you get 10 years in prison, you're out in 4 with good behavior and that kind of thing. Federal system, they say you get 5 years. There's a good chance you're serving 5. And it's just the feds, for the longest time, have said, no, we're done with this game playing. And it's like truth in sentencing, right? So we want people, if they know that they're facing 10 years in prison for doing a serious federal offense, that there's a good chance they're going to serve 10 years. But the sentencing guidelines will say things like, here's the range. Minimum, say 1 year. Maximum, 10 years. And then it'll say, and here are the things that the court should consider when determining where they go in there. Keep in mind that if a judge can put on the record extraordinary reasons, they can exceed the guidelines or go the other way if there's extraordinary circumstances. But the court will be told, and it's all written in the statutes, things you can do to take into account a sentence. And so some of the obvious ones are, is this their first offense? Do they have a real long criminal record of things, maybe not like this, but just a criminal record? Does it seem they're likely to re-offend? That kind of thing. And then there's also other things like, is this person a long-standing member of the community where they're upstanding and they've got this great reputation, and this is like the first time they've gotten in trouble? Versus this person's been a ne'er-do-well for their entire life, and everybody's happy to see them off the street. And so what will often happen is the plea gets entered, then they send you to the probation department or equivalent, and they will interview you, pull your records, and look at everything, and then they will send a recommendation to the judge, and then the judge will read that for guidance. And I can tell you that in state courts, it's not uncommon for the judge to read the recommendation of the probation department and simply ask the prosecutor, is there anything you'd like to add to this? The prosecutor goes, no, we're good. Defense counsel, anything you'd like to add to this? And quite often they'll say, no, we'll abide by, we stand by the report of the probation department. And I've seen a judge go, okay, and just read that in the record and rubber stamp it. But I've also seen judges who've looked at a recommendation and go, you know something? While I appreciate the report, it looks like they missed some stuff. And that's the job of the judge. And the judge was there, at least if there was a trial, sitting through the trial. And I've seen a case before where a judge said, you know something, the person who wrote this report didn't sit through the trial like I did. And I saw things and heard things that aren't in this report. So I'd like to deviate from what this report says. But I've also seen it many times where a judge just goes, okay, reads the report in and does a recommendation. This one, however, is scary. And I'm going to tell you right now, keep in mind that things that make the news are usually unusual. Otherwise, they wouldn't be news. And you've got a federal officer who's stealing cash from people crossing the border and pocketing the money. And he appears to have done it at least 17 times that they know of. 17 times. And it's a little bit right around $1,000 a person. $1,000 a person. And if I had to guess, I suspect he thought, well, $1,000 a person, are they going to really complain? Or are they just going to kind of chalk it up to, well, I claimed I had $6,000 in cash. Now the guy gives me back $5,000. He stole $1,000. And when they come to me and say, hey, did you steal this guy's money? I'm going to go, no, of course not. They came in with the money they left, my checkpoint with. They're lying. And he probably thought he could get away with that. But also understand that to get a federal job, they do check your background. And you should also know, if you get a federal job, that they take your job very seriously. And so if they catch somebody doing something like this, they're going to throw the book at them. Now, we've heard stories about people in small town police departments who get in all kinds of trouble and they get a slap on the wrist and they pop up someplace else doing the exact same job 2 towns over. It's a little different here because the feds don't take this stuff lightly. So I'm glad to see that they prosecuted the guy. Glad to see he pleaded guilty to it. We'll see how he gets sentenced. But it's a scary concept because, like I said, and as Daniel jokingly pointed out, sometimes people expect their cash to be taken by government agents. And for those of you who don't know this, or if you haven't flown internationally lately, you might not be thinking about this. But when you're coming into America or any other country from outside, there's almost always a form they give you. In America specifically, they give you this form that you fill out. And usually, the people on board the airplane hand them out. I mean, you're killing time on a long flight. They go, by the way, you need to fill these declarations out before you go through customs. And it's a bunch of basic questions. Are you bringing over any fruits or vegetables? Are you bringing home any live animals? But there is one that says, are you carrying any cash on you? And the thing is, you're allowed to carry cash. You just have to declare it. And I've always said that when we talk about civil asset forfeiture, is that you are allowed to travel domestically with cash all day long. There's nothing wrong with it. You're also allowed to bring cash into the country. You're just required to declare it. And that's where a lot of people run afoul of the law, is they either make a mistake or they fill that form out wrong, or they missed the part where it goes, are you carrying cash, above a certain amount, et cetera, et cetera. So you're legally allowed to do it, but this guy was just slicing off a little for himself. That's the counting fee, $1,000 to count your money. Daniel, thanks for sending it from NBCnews.com. CBP officer pleads guilty to stealing $18,000 from flight passengers during inspections. That's according to officials, and he's pleaded guilty to it. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. They don't know that we know. They know we know.